You might be shocked to learn the truth about what Jesus really looked like. Was he really how we imagine him today? A letter written by Pontius Pilate to the Roman Emperor Tiberius reveals surprising details about Jesus' appearance, things that aren't even in the Bible. In that letter, Pilate also talks about Jesus' miracles, his trial, crucifixion, and even his resurrection. So what exactly did Pilate say? He began by greeting the emperor and said recent events in Judea were so strange, he had to report them. He felt these events might one day affect the whole Roman Empire. Pilate wrote that ever since he became governor of Judea, he faced many troubles. When he arrived in Jerusalem, he threw a big banquet and invited local leaders, but no one came. He saw this as a sign of disrespect. Later, the high priest visited him and claimed his religion didn't allow him to eat with Romans. But Pilate felt the man was lying and knew he secretly hated Roman rule. Pilate warned the emperor that the Jewish high priests cared more about power and money than anything else. He said Jerusalem was the hardest city to control, and the people were so rebellious that he feared an uprising. I spoke with the governor of Syria, but he told me he barely had enough troops to protect his own region. It seems we're more focused on expanding than securing what we already control. I worry this might eventually cause our government to fall. I've stayed away from the people, afraid that the priests might turn them against us. Still, I've tried to understand their thoughts and concerns. One rumor caught my attention. People were talking about a young man in Galilee teaching a new message, claiming to be sent by God. At first, I thought he might be stirring up trouble. But I soon realized that wasn't true. Jesus of Nazareth seemed more peaceful and even kinder toward Romans than toward his own people. One day, I saw a large crowd listening to a calm young man leaning against a tree. It was Jesus. I didn't interrupt, but I sent my secretary, Luz, to quietly listen. Luz speaks Hebrew and is someone I fully trust. When Luz came back, he told me what Jesus said. I've never read such wisdom, even in the writings of our own philosophers. When someone asked Jesus if Jews should pay taxes to Caesar, he answered, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." That answer impressed me. I had the power to arrest or exile him, but I chose not to. It would have been unjust. Justice is a core value of Rome. Jesus was not a rebel. I even tried to protect him, maybe without him realizing it. He had full freedom to speak, teach, and gather followers. If one day, God forbid, the religion of our ancestors is replaced by that of Jesus, it may be because of the freedom I gave him. That tolerance might lead to Rome's downfall. I, unknowingly, could be part of what the Jews call providence, and we call fate. Jesus offended the wealthy and powerful Jewish leaders. He called out the Pharisees, saying they were like fancy tombs, clean outside but full of death inside. He valued humility over status and spoke boldly every day. People complained to me constantly, warning me he was in danger. Jerusalem had a history of stoning prophets. I didn't have enough soldiers to stop a riot, so I invited Jesus to speak with me. When he arrived, I was shocked. He stood calmly, his presence pure and powerful. I was shaken, but he was steady. I told him I admired his wisdom, greater even than Socrates or Plato. But I warned him, his enemies were growing, and I might be forced to act. Jesus calmly replied, "You speak not from true wisdom. The laws of God cannot be stopped. Before the rose blooms, the blood of the righteous will be shed." I promised to protect him, but he shook his head. "There will be no refuge for the Son of Man. My refuge is in heaven." The prophets spoke the truth. I begged him to be careful. He replied, "I came not to bring war, but peace, love, and truth. I was born when Augustus brought peace to Rome. Still, I know I will face persecution." After he left, I felt relieved, but heavy with guilt. Herod, too, feared Jesus but wouldn't act. He asked what I thought of him. I said Jesus wasn't political and didn't deserve punishment. Herod mocked me and left. As Passover neared, crowds demanded Jesus' death. Reports said temple money was used to stir up the people. I asked Syria for reinforcements, but none came. I was alone, with few troops, in a city on the brink. Jesus was arrested, though he posed no real threat. Crowds, stirred by their leaders, screamed, "Crucify him!" 3 groups joined against him: the Herodians, Sadducees, and Pharisees. They hated him, and me. They never forgave my past mistakes or my tolerance of Jesus. Jesus was brought to the high priest, sentenced to death, and sent to me for approval. I passed him to Herod, but Herod sent him back. Now it was my problem alone. Jerusalem filled with angry mobs. A mystic fell at my feet, begging me not to harm Jesus, warning of visions and disasters if I did. When Jesus was returned to me, I faced the crowd and asked what he had done wrong. They shouted, "He claimed to be God's son, the King of the Jews." I told them Rome doesn't kill for such things. Still they screamed louder, "Crucify him." To try to save him, I offered to release a prisoner, as was tradition during Passover. I suggested Jesus. But the crowd chose violence. Back then, a judge couldn't sentence someone to death without fasting all day. The death sentence also needed approval from the Sanhedrin and its leader. No execution could happen on the same day. The next day, the court had to review everything again. On execution day, a man stood by the court with a banner while another on horseback announced the condemned man's name, crime, and witnesses, asking if anyone could speak in his defense. The prisoner could return up to 3 times to give new reasons for his innocence. I tried to calm the crowd by reminding them of all this, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him." I ordered Jesus to be flogged, hoping it would be enough. It wasn't. Their anger only grew. I washed my hands before them, saying I found no reason to kill him, but it didn't matter. The crowd was wild, louder, and more violent than anything I had ever seen, even in past riots. The sky darkened, like a winter evening. It reminded me of Caesar's death. As governor, I stood alone, watching Jesus, an innocent man, being led to die. The city felt empty, covered in sadness. It felt like something bigger than human judgment was happening. At Golgotha, the cries of pain echoed. The sky turned black. People said it felt like the universe was falling apart. Then came an earthquake that shook Egypt and terrified the people. Later, I walked to the site. Jesus was already gone. People were quietly heading home. Even my soldiers looked shaken. Some Jews were whispering about miracles. At the steps of the Praetorium, I saw an old man crying, Joseph of Arimathea. He begged to bury Jesus. I agreed and ordered guards to protect the body. A few days later, the tomb was found empty. The disciples claimed Jesus had risen, just like he had said. A priest feared the disciples would steal the body, so I assigned guards. But when I asked the commander what happened, he said a glowing light appeared, the earth shook, and he saw what looked like joyful risen dead people with heavenly music. He fainted in fear. I asked if he had mistaken it for the sunrise. He said no, it was too early and too dark. Something unexplainable happened. I asked the guard if he felt dizzy because he stood up too fast, but he said no. He hadn't slept all night. Sleeping during duty meant death. He had let some soldiers rest, and some were still asleep when it all happened. I asked how long the strange event lasted. He guessed about an hour, until the sun came up. I asked if he went to the tomb afterward, and he said no, he was scared and left when backup came. The priests later questioned him. They told him to say there was an earthquake and the guards were asleep. They even offered him money to say Jesus' disciples stole the body. But he said he didn't see anyone and only heard later that the body was gone. He said some priests believed Jesus wasn't just a man, not even really Mary's son, but someone who had lived before, in the times of Abraham and Lot. If that's true, it would explain a lot. Jesus healed people, raised the dead, calmed storms, and more. Even his enemies said he had power over nature, like a potter with clay. Jesus wasn't accused of hurting people or breaking laws. He caused trouble because of the miracles he did, not because of any crime. Pontius Pilate said Jesus stood out. He was calm, kind, and had a peaceful look. His hair was long, soft, and light brown, almost blonde. His eyes were deep and wise, some saw brown, others blue. His skin was fair and smooth, and his face was both gentle and strong. He had a full, neat beard and dressed simply but with dignity. No jewelry, just a long robe and tunic. Jesus gave off a feeling of peace, even without speaking. My noble sovereign, this is the best and most honest account I can give. I hope it helps you judge fairly. With full respect, I remain your loyal servant. If you liked this video, subscribe now. Tap the video on your screen to uncover more mysteries like this one.